الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم. اللهم انصر الإسلام وأعز المسلمين. اللهم احفظ أهلنا في جنين. اللهم احفظ أهل فلسطين. اللهم اغفر لنا وارحمنا وأنت أرحم الراحمين. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين. ثم أما بعد. So we're continuing the story of the seerah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and maybe just do a quick kind of pop quiz at the beginning, because I don't think we've done enough of these. And this pop quiz is not going to be on the seerah. The Shaykh was reciting in Isha now from which surah? Very easy. Al-Ma'idah, right. And so Surah Al-Ma'idah, why is it called Surah Al-Ma'idah? The table, which means what? Yeah, that's right, that table. So there's an ayah at the end, very last page, that the Shaykh was reciting. Hawreen, yeah. So where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says about Isa ibn Maryam, alayhi salam, He says, on the day of judgment, He will say to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, إِن تُعَذِّبْهُمْ فَإِنَّهُمْ عِبَادَكَ وَإِن تَغْفِرْ لَهُمْ فَإِنَّكَ أَنْتَ from the last ayah. Al-Aziz al-Hakim. Al-Aziz al-Hakim. So Isa ibn Maryam says to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the day of judgment, after he's questioned by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, did you tell them? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says on the day of judgment, he will be asked, Isa ibn Maryam will be asked, did you tell these people to worship me and my mother instead of the one true Allah? Did you tell them? Is that what you told them? And Isa ibn Maryam says absolutely not. I didn't tell them any of that. And then he goes on to say, إِن تُعَذِّبْهُمْ, if you punish them, they are your servants. But if you forgive them, إِنَّكَ أَنْتَ الْعَزِيزُ الْحَكِيمُ. Do you follow what he's saying? Why does Isa ibn Maryam say Al-Aziz al-Hakim and not, for example, Ar-Rahman ar-Rahim? It's an easy question. Why? Because Al-Aziz al-Hakim are from the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ar-Rahman ar-Rahim is also from the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You think that Isa ibn Maryam on the day of judgment, if he says if you forgive them, he wouldn't say Al-Aziz, he would say if you forgive them, you are Ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala starts off the surah in the Quran by saying Ar-Rahman, that's it, first ayah, Ar-Rahman, one of the most important attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When we recite the Fatiha, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, right? Why does Isa ibn Maryam on the day of judgment say, if you forgive them, you are Al-Aziz al-Hakim? So wait, before you continue, so the brother is saying because the first one because of mercy, Aziz is not mercy. Okay. Okay, if he's okay for the people to be forgiven, he should forgive them. Okay, you're on the right track. The violation is against Allah, and therefore... that's the correct answer. So the answer is, they actually don't deserve the mercy. The answer is the violation is so big. The violation of these people is so big that Isa alayhi salam doesn't say they deserve to be forgiven. So he doesn't use the attributes of Ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. He says if you decide, they deserve to be punished. But if you decide to forgive them, you are the most powerful. This is Al-Aziz, and Al-Hakim means what? The most wise. It's up to you. You have your own reasons for forgiving them. But they actually don't deserve it. SubhanAllah. Okay, so let's go back and review last time. What year of Hijrah again are we in? Can someone remind me? What year of Hijrah? The 8th year of Hijrah, right. And last time, what did we talk about? Sariyah called That is Salasil. Salasil comes from, okay, chains. In this particular case, it's not though. In this particular case, it is. River, right? River called Salsa. So there's two that is Salasil that you'll hear about in the history of Islam or the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ and what comes behind. So this is one, Sariyat That is Salasil, which happened after Mu'tah and before Fath Makkah and was led by Sayyidina Amr ibn al-As. Then there's Ma'arakat Zat al-Salasil, the battle of Zat al-Salasil, which happened at the time of the Khilafah of Sayyidina Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. This was the first major battle between the Muslims and the Persians in what is southern Iraq or today the area of Kuwait, right? So there's two separate ones. And this particular That al-Salasil is the Sariyah that was led by Sayyidina Amr ibn al-As radiyallahu anhu. And we learned a very famous hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam where what does he say to Sayyidina Amr ibn al-As? What does he say to him at the end of the hadith? Like the punchline of the hadith. You'll get a lot of ghanima, and Sayyidina Amr said to him, I did not come here for ghanima. Sayyidina Amr ibn al-As was already pretty well off. He said, I joined Islam for Islam, and I joined Islam to follow you. So then what's the hadith? Ni'mah al-mal al-salih lil-rajul al-salih. The best of wealth, the best of possession is the pure possession, the pure wealth for the good man. Right? Because we know wealth in the power of a good person can be used for good. Wealth in the power of a bad person can be used for corruption. Wealth in the power of a bad person can be used in corruption, right? So the Prophet ﷺ said, no, you should take it. You'll get the ghanima and you should take it. You should use it. Use it for good. Use it for good, right? So this is the hadith, Na'am al-mal al-salih lil-rajul al-salih. Okay. And then we know that the Prophet ﷺ sent Sayyidina Abu Ubaidah ibn al-Jarrah as a backup, and we know that Sayyidina Abu Ubaidah radiallahu anhu let go of the leadership for Sayyidina Amr ibn al-As. And then there was a specific incident that the fuqaha take some learnings from. What happened on the way back with the prayer? Sayyidina Amr ibn al-As should have showered, and he didn't. Right? The Sahaba said, here's the water. Here's the water, you can shower. What did he say? It's very cold. I'm going to shower. And he led the prayer. He led the prayer, and he became the Imam, and he led the prayer. And when they went back, they complained to the Prophet ﷺ. And what did Sayyidina Amr ibn al-As say to the Prophet ﷺ? He said, I heard Allah say, this is a new Muslim. He says, I heard Allah say, Ya ayyuhal ladina amanu, la taqtulu anfusakum, inna Allah kana bikum rahima. Oh, you who believe, do not harm yourselves, do not kill yourselves. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is most certainly merciful with you. So I found, Ya Rasulullah, that if I would have used the water, it would have been too cold for me. So I did tayammum, and I still led the prayer. And the Prophet ﷺ let him go, right? The Prophet ﷺ let him go. Okay. And we learned from that the ijtihad of the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, the fact that it takes real world knowledge, that the Prophet ﷺ accepted that from them. And we learned the ayah actually in the same surah, Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu idha qumtum ila as-salah فَاغْسِلُوا وُجُوهَكُمْ وَأَيْدِيكُمْ إِلَى الْمَرَافِقِ. And then we learned this other situation about this companion that was killed. You could call him by friendly fire, Amr ibn al-Adba al-Ashja'i. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reveals an ayah, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا إِذَا ضَرَبْتُمْ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ فَتَبَيَّنُوا. All you who believe, before you strike someone, you should make tabayyun. You should verify whether this person is an enemy or a friend. Okay. So now we're going to move to the reason for the start of Fath Makkah. Really, between now and Ramadan, I'm hopeful, inshallah, we will finish Fath Makkah. So Fath Makkah will be with us for probably the next 4 or 5 times, right? So the start of Fath Makkah, as we know, a few years ago, there was a treaty signed with the Quraysh called Sulh Hudaybiyah. Someone remind me, what are the conditions of the treaty? The peace treaty between the Muslims and between the mushriks of Quraysh, of Makkah. For how long? There's a car lease on a Tesla. Okay. So there will be no war for 10 years. Okay. There will be no war for 10 years. Okay. Correct. If anyone accepts Islam and runs over to Medina, right, like an illegal immigrant, you send them back on the plane, right? But if one of you wants to become a mushrik, we'll take him. Okay, we'll take him back. Okay, so that's the other condition. So no Umrah? No Umrah this year? Come back next year. Okay, come back next year. What else? Anything about what you can bring back to Umrah? You only allow 20 kilos of luggage, only light snacks. Yeah, no weapons, no heavy armor, nothing that is going to provoke a war or is going to scare us, right? What else? This is it. This is the one I'm looking for. Whoever decides to go into the alliance of Mecca will stay in the alliance of Mecca. Whoever decides to go in the alliance of the Muslims will stay in the alliance of the Muslims. So we will respect alliances. We will respect alliances. Now, we know for a fact, most of the Arabs did what? They aligned themselves with Islam or entered into Islam completely. Right? So next time, I keep saying I want a whiteboard so I can draw maps for you guys. Islam started to spread in a big way. Many of the tribes started to enter into Islam, right? So the Mecca now feels lopsided But they went from being the superpower of the Arabs, the richest of the Arabs, to now really on a major decline, right? And so there are two tribes we're going to talk about. One tribe called Khuza'a and one tribe called Banu Bakr. Khuza'a and Banu Bakr. Khuza'a aligned themselves with the Muslims, and then Banu Bakr aligned themselves with the Quraysh. Now, essentially what happens is one attacks the other and the Muslims go to war, right? So the bad guys that are aligned with the Quraysh go and attack the tribe aligned to the Muslims, and the Muslims go and they fight, and this is one of the reasons why Fath Makkah occurs. However, let's just explain the background for it in a little bit more detail. So Khuza'a, there's a history of Khuza'a. So now we're going to go into the history of the Arabs. You'll find this in the books of Sirah, or for example, Al-Bidayah wa Nihaya for Ibn Kathir, like that discuss the Arab tribe's lineage. The reason I'm telling you this is part of what they use when they go to the Prophet ﷺ to make their case in Medina. They use their history and their lineage, right? They use 3 points, and the first one is their history and their lineage. Khuza'a starts off, they go back as far as history with Banu Hashim. Now, Banu Hashim have a history in that, let's go way back when Mecca was founded. Who was Mecca founded by? We have dinner, coffee, biryani is still active. What's Ismail alayhi salam? Like this, not a trick question. Ismail alayhi salam went with his father Ibrahim, right, alayhi salam, when he's still a baby, and he stayed there with the mother, and the mother called Ibrahim alayhi salam back, and Ibrahim alayhi salam does not respond, and she tells him, did Allah tell you to leave us here? And he says yes, and he leaves them, and then a group of Arabs, you could say nomads or whatever, are passing by. What was that tribe called? Jurhum, mashallah, Jurhum. The first tribe to settle in the area was called Jurhum, right? So these are effectively the in-laws of Ismail alayhi salam, because he marries from them. Ismail alayhi salam, when he grows up, he marries from this tribe called Jurhum. And this is about, they were in charge of Mecca, most historians say about 300 CE. So at one point in time, this tribe of Jurhum then, a man called Amr ibn Khuza'a, so Amr ibn Luhay ibn Khuza'a, or Amr ibn Luhay al-Khuza'i, Jurhum, by the way, becomes an evil people. So at one point in time, Jurhum are the sons-in-law or the in-laws of Ismail alayhi salam. Then they turn into really evil people. Amr ibn Khuza'a, Amr ibn Luhay al-Khuza'i, he effectively expels the Jurhum. He expels these bad people, these bad Arabs that had come and settled into Mecca. On one of his trips, this guy is very famous. Anyone heard of Amr ibn Luhay in the history of the Arabs? What did he do? That's it. So on one of his trips to Syria, he runs into a tribe they were called the Amalekites. They're the ones that lived in the northern sort of Sham Peninsula, and they're worshipping Asnam. And he's really impressed by them. He has an inferiority complex. He goes to a you guys have a subway here, you guys have a metro, you have trains underground, like you have these Asnam, can we have one? So they say, oh, no problem. They give him their best one, and their best one is called Hubal. So their superpower Sanam is called Hubal. He takes Hubal back. He effectively founds the worship of Asnam in Mecca. Amr ibn Luhay. Amr ibn Luhay is the one that founds the worship of Asnam in Mecca, right? And by the way, Amr ibn Luhay, people loved him. People in general loved him. They loved him for multiple reasons. One, he expelled the bad guys, right? The second is he was very generous towards the Hujjaj. He was a very generous man. He took care of the Hujjaj. If people wanted him money, he'd give the money, and so on and so forth. And so he brings Hubal back to the Arabian peninsula. The Arabs in Mecca start to worship it, and this is why Abu Sufyan at the end of Uhud, what does he say? U'lu Hubal. At the end of Uhud, right? He says U'lu Hubal. Hubal is still the Sanam that they care about the most, right? And the Prophet ﷺ tells them to respond. What did they say? Allahu A'la wa Ajal, right? He tells Sayyidina Umar to respond. Okay, so then after that, there's a situation where Qusay ibn Kilab, who is now the fourth grandfather of the Prophet ﷺ, so the lineage of the Prophet ﷺ, his name is Qusay ibn Kilab. He effectively is the founder of the Quraysh, that you could say the modern day Quraysh as we know it today, meaning the Quraysh at the time of the Prophet ﷺ. Qusay ibn Kilab marries the daughter of the chief and effectively overthrows this Amr. He overthrows him, right? So his clan takes over. He is now in power of Mecca, and this is now how the Banu Hashim start to come to be. You understand? He's the fourth grandfather of the Prophet ﷺ. And by the way, he's married to the daughter's chief. So he's married to the daughter's chief. He overthrows it and he takes it on. When he takes over Mecca, the relationship, no civil war actually occurs. So you think that a civil war would occur between the two tribes, but he actually maintains the peace quite well in Mecca, and there's good feelings between the people. And he creates an alliance called Hizb al-Fudul. So some of you may have heard of Hizb al-Fudul, right? Which got transmitted until the time of the Prophet ﷺ. It just took on different forms, right? So Hizb al-Fudul essentially says that both tribes will be one tribe. Both tribes in Mecca will be one tribe. And we will be one tribe against whoever attacks us from the outside. So both Meccan tribes will be together as anyone that comes from the outside. And they effectively become one tribe. And in part of the arguments that Khuza'a makes to the Prophet ﷺ is many of their people accept Islam. Many of the people of Khuza'a actually accept Islam. The Banu Bakr on the other side are the side. So does everyone now understand the history of the Khuza'a tribe? Okay. Hold on to what I just said because it's going to come up in Medina now. Okay. So then the Banu Bakr tribe aligned themselves with Quraysh. By the way, both of these tribes, just to give you an idea geographically, are they're the suburbs of Quraysh. Part of the reason why they're very important is Mecca is right in the middle. Mecca is right here. One is to the north and one is to the south. They're very close to each other. So they're not only close to the Quraysh, but they're close to the Haram. And the Haram means something to the Arabs. Even the Mushrik Arabs, the Haram was sanctified. The Haram was sanctified, right? Okay. So the Banu Bakr decide to engage on a raid against the Khuza'a. This is in the 8th year of Hijrah. Now, why do they do this? There's bad relationships between them that's existed for over 100 years. Just like the Arabs of Jahiliyyah, when they used to get in fights or wars or battles, it used to go on and on and on and on. Oh, you killed 2 people, we now have to go for war. There you go, and you killed 4 people, you killed 2 more people, you took a cow, we took a camel, you took this, you took that. And just like the Aus and the Khazraj in Medina. So these were just the Jahili Arabs' traditions. When war starts, it doesn't end until we get back what we feel like we deserve, right? And so this war has existed for 100 years, and the Banu Bakr decided to go after revenge of the dead, and that was just the law of the tribes, and they would raid each other. Incidentally, believe it or not, the Arabs of Jahiliyyah had some rules even when they raided each other versus modern day human beings and oppressors. When they raided another tribe, it was okay to fight whatever men were there on guard. It was okay to steal money, none of this is okay, I'm just telling you in their law, to take back wealth, to take back money, to take back camels and sheep and cows and that kind of thing. It was never okay to go after the women and the children. Never okay, right? So that was something that they did not touch, right? So they went in and they raided them. By the way, when they went in and they raided, they asked the Quraysh for permission. They asked Quraysh for permission, and Quraysh, wink, wink, said yes. Quraysh said, wink, wink, yes. Okay. Most of the narrators of Sirah will tell you that Quraysh probably agreed for a percentage of whatever they end up winning. This is going to be an easy fight. Whatever you end up winning, like no one knows we're supplying you. No one knows we approved of this. Wink, wink, you go in, but we get 10%. You understand that this is kind of what happened. So they have the permission to attack, and they go after them. There's a pond on the area called Al-Watin. The operation turns into a complete disaster. So this was to be a very quick raid. No one will hear about it. A bunch of ninjas go in. They take back $1 million and a bunch of cows and they're like, no one knows who even did this. It turns into a complete disaster because the men wake up and they start to fight with the invaders, and the women are out there, and they end up killing 20 people. They end up killing 20 people. Like, this is now a major massacre. For a small tribe, 20 people is like a big deal. 20 people is a really big deal, right? So they kill 20 people in the raid, including women and children. And what really piques the furor, if you like, of the rest of the anger of the rest of the tribes against them is that one person goes to the Haram. One person runs off to the Haram, and they follow him in the Haram, and they kill him in the Haram. It's actually narrated in the books of Sirah. He's pursued by a man on a horse, and even when he enters into the Haram, he says, Rabbuk, Rabbuk. Like, when he sees he's coming, he's like, I'm on sacred land. Like, you can't kill me. The Arabs had rules that said, even like they would say in their history, they would say, even if you saw the murderer of your father at the haram, you wouldn't dare go kill him. And you knew 100% that was you wouldn't dare go touch him, right? And so he says, he says like, respect your master. And the man says something of complete kufr, like there is no master today, and he kills him anyway at haram, right? So the chief of Khuza'ah goes to the Prophet ﷺ. The story that I just told you is said to the Prophet ﷺ in the Masjid al-Nabawi in poetry. This was the power of the language. He doesn't just go and tell him, here's what happened, I'm going to write a 2-pager. No, he gives it to the Prophet ﷺ in poetry. By the way, it's extremely advanced Arabic poetry. Like if you read it, many of the modern day, myself included, Arabs would not understand. Like you need a translator of Arabic to tell you what it means, and then they give it to you kind of in layman's terms, right? So extremely sophisticated language. He goes and he tells the Prophet ﷺ the story, and he builds his poetry around 3 key points. 3 key points. Point number 1 is both him, meaning the chief of Khuza'ah, and the Prophet ﷺ have the same ancestors, going back 4 generations. So that's point number 1. They knew, by the way, there's a lesson here that immediately the historians of Sirah say, which is how strongly the Arabs knew their genealogy. Like many of us today, they'll say, who's your grandfather? You'll say so. Who's your great-grandfather? And then by the time they get to like 2 above, 3 above, like, you don't know. Not only do you not know their names, but like the last name completely changed, right? So, but they knew it. They knew it very well, right? This is the son of so-and-so, the son of so-and-so, the son of so-and-so, the son of so-and-so. Because they knew that and they respected that, right? So he comes and he says to the Prophet ﷺ that we have the same ancestors. That's the point number 1 that he makes in his poem. Point number 2 is the treaty that Abdul Muttalib made, where we defend each other, and there's like a ton of like we defend each other, and then there's like 4 or 5 points, like as long as the sun shines on the tribe of Sadid, and as long as the water lives in the ocean of this, and like he reminds them of the points of condition of that treaty of defending each other, right? And then number 3, he mentions the Sulh al-Hudaybiyah as well, and he says to him, they killed us ruk'an sujjadan, part of what he uses in the poetry. They killed us even though we were making ruku' and sujood, referring to the situation where the man runs to the haram and he is still killed, right? And he's still killed. By most accounts, the head of Khuza'ah that makes this point to the Prophet ﷺ wasn't even Muslim. But his point is, and the points he makes are very strong, right? And we give justice whether or not the person is a Muslim or non-Muslim. We don't accept oppression for anyone. This is not the point, right? Many of his tribesmen had been Muslim. He himself was not Muslim, but he goes and he represents his tribe anyway to the Prophet ﷺ in Medina, in al-Masjid al-Nabawi, right? And the Prophet ﷺ hears this, and he is very moved by what happens. And he says to them, in effect, translated in English, may Allah never help me if I don't help the Banu Ka'b, right? Meaning I'm absolutely committed to helping you against this injustice that just occurred to you. So the Prophet ﷺ gives him that commitment. And then the Prophet ﷺ sees a cloud over the city, and he says, this is the sign of victory from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's the end of that hadith of the leader of the Khuza'ah going to the Masjid of the Prophet ﷺ. So there's 3 things that we learn, 3 or 4 things that we learn. One is, knowledge of ancestry of the Arabs. The second is, their knowledge of the family ties, and the respect for the family ties, even up to the 5th cousins. The treaties, even before Islam, are still binding. The treaties, even before Islam, are still binding at the time of Islam, so long as there's nothing haram in the treaty, right? And then the other point that I think I brought up before various times is this idea that we look for good omens, and there's 2 conditions for good omens in Islam. What are they? The Prophet ﷺ says he loves al-fa'l. Fa'l means optimism. And there's 2 conditions for these signs. What are they? One is it's a positive sign, and the second is you link it to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You link it to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? These are the conditions of al-fa'l in Islam. We don't believe in negative omens. Like if you sit and you make a dua, let's say, and then you hear thunder, it doesn't mean Allah is saying no to the dua. Right? Like we don't believe in that. Okay. Ibn Ishaq, and this hadith in Bukhari, by the way, yu'jibni al-fa'l. Like the Prophet ﷺ says, I love optimism, right? You can find this hadith in Bukhari. So there's now 2 narrations as to what happens. Two branches in the books of Sirah as to what happened. So Ibn Ishaq and various others say the Prophet ﷺ took that immediately to be a reason for the attack on the Quraysh. Right? This is a big opinion. The second opinion narrated by Ibn Hajar is he says the Prophet ﷺ first tried to negotiate with the Quraysh, and he gave them an ultimatum before he decided to attack them. So he's like, the way to fix this is the following. And he gave them two conditions for fixing this. Number one is you must cut your ties with the Banu Bakr and refrain to supply them of weapons or deals or protection or anything like that. Number two, you must pay back the blood money for the 20 people that you killed, right? The second opinion holds a hadith of people that were not Muslim that seem to lend it credence. And here's what they say. And the Prophet ﷺ says, if you don't abide by these two conditions together, you will face war. So one is he just went straight to war, and the second is he gave them this ultimatum. Pay back the blood money, cut your ties with the Banu Bakr, or we go to war. And the Quraysh refused both. So this is by narrators on the Quraysh side. Like we took this to Dar al-Nadwa, and both conditions were refused, right? How much blood money would have been paid for 20 people? See if here people remember. So 20 people, let's say the Quraysh had said yes. 100 camels? Times 20, okay, and what's the answer to that? 2,000 camels, mashallah. Okay, so he got it right. He got the formula right, mashallah. 2,000 camels was a massive amount of wealth. 2,000 camels literally is like Quraysh going bankrupt. You understand? So that's not acceptable to the Quraysh. Like no way we could pay that much. No way we could pay that much, right? So how many camels were there in Badr? How many camels, do we know how many camels were in Badr? Like between Badr and Uhud, maybe there was 200. Like it would literally have bankrupted the Quraysh. The 2,000 camels is like the economy for multiple years on, right? And the Abu Sufyan now, when he sees this, he's like, he wants to avoid this war as much as he can. Abu Sufyan is now the leader of the Quraysh. He's in Mecca. He's seeing this news. He's like, what do we do? How can we find some common ground to mediate between us and the Muslims, right? Pause for a second. What has Abu Sufyan done to the Muslims in the past? So Abu Sufyan, radiallahu anhu, to be clear, he's a companion of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We respect him, extreme respect. He accepted Islam when? After Fath Makkah, right? After Fath Makkah. At this time when this is happening, he's a mushrik. What's his history with us before? He led Uhud, so he was the commander of the army. You said that too? Okay, you guys split the points. Any? That's it? He didn't do anything else? He met with the Roman Empire. He tried to discredit the Prophet ﷺ. I mean, he's been working against Islam from day one. He's been working against Islam right from the beginning. He didn't want Islam. He was one of the ones that created the secret police, him and a bunch of others, to capture them in early Mecca. He wanted to find out where Islam was being taught. He discredited the Prophet ﷺ. They made fun of him. If it had not been for him coming back from the trip before Badr, he would have joined Badr. But the only reason he didn't join is because he was on his way back. Otherwise, he would have gone with the army. He led the army in Uhud. He had extreme hatred for Islam from the beginning. And subhanAllah, you see with these companions, radiallahu anhum, we talked last few times about Khalid ibn Walid, radiallahu anhu, Amr ibn al-As, radiallahu anhu. I mean, look at how much Islam changes people. What their history was before, and then what they become after they become Muslim, right? So Abu Sufyan has a long history of hatred and just evil with the Muslims. And now he finds himself, I'm telling you this story because you're going to see this whole Halaqa is about Abu Sufyan. You're going to see what he goes through to try to stop this battle from happening. Because he knows now it's on his head. You understand? So they realize that the Quraysh 100% realizes that they're in the wrong. 100%. Like there's no debate. There's no like, let's go to court and decide who, like there's nothing like that, right? And honestly, I say this like with fascination. This is one of the most interesting parts of the seerah. This what happened with Abu Sufyan, right? This particular story of Abu Sufyan. Quraysh, by the way, they encourage him to go. The rest of the clan leaders, they go, yeah, you go. You're mostly related to, you're closest one to the Prophet ﷺ. You go, right? If he's going to listen to anyone, he's going to listen to you, even with your terrible background. You're wanted. Right? Even though with that background, you're still closest to the relationship. So Abu Sufyan goes to the Prophet ﷺ, and like I said, he led Uhud, he led Ahzab, and there's two stories of the events that occurred. One story is that first he went to the Prophet ﷺ, then he went to Abu Bakr Siddiq, then he went to Umar ibn Khattab, then he went to Ali ibn Abi Talib. That's one story of the events. The other story says first he went to Abu Bakr, then he went to Umar, then he went to Ali ibn Abi Talib, then he went to the Prophet ﷺ. The most likely one is the first one. By the way, it ends the same way, but the most likely one is he went to the first one, right? And he goes to the Prophet ﷺ. This is in Ibn Ishaq, and he goes to him first, and he asks him to please not come after us. Please don't come and attack. Please forgive us. Please, we're sorry for. He goes on all these excuses, and the hadith of Abu Sufyan says, فَلَمْ يَرُدَّ عَلَيَّ بِشَيْءٍ. The Prophet ﷺ would not give him an answer. He would not say yes. He just listened to him, and he would not respond to him. Right, and so then he leaves and he goes to his friend Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu, and he implores Abu Bakr. He implores Abu Bakr to go speak to the Prophet ﷺ. You can see, subhanAllah, now this man that thought he was mighty and amazing and magical. And by the way, he was super rich, and he's a smart guy, very rich, commander of the army, leader of Mecca. And look how low Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put him for the things that he's done before, right? He goes to Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, and Abu Bakr says, La astati'a. Hadith of Abu Bakr says, I can't help you. There's nothing I can do for you, right? And then he goes to Umar. By the way, he was friends with Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. At some point in time in Mecca, he was actually friends with Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. He goes to Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu, and saying about, and by the way, Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu, in the times of Jahiliyyah, used to be his business partner. There was they had a joint business together at one point in time. So he goes to his old friend and business partner Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu, and Umar radiallahu anhu mocks him. And he mocks him. He says, do you think I would help you? Do you think I would go to bat for you? Like there's other ways to say this in English that I'm not, but like Umar radiallahu anhu makes a lot of fun of it. He's like, are you joking? Are you kidding me? You're coming here to ask me to intercede on your behalf with the Prophet? Get out of my face, right? Get out of my face, right? So he doesn't get anything from Umar but mockery. And he goes to Ali ibn Abi Talib radiallahu anhu. And Ali ibn Abi Talib is as close a relationship with him as the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? Second cousins or so. And he goes and he says, you're the closest person to me. This hadith is beautiful. He says, you're the closest person to me, and I really need your help. He's just begging them. I really need your help to convince the Prophet ﷺ, not to attack, because he has grounds for breaking the treaty. And he says to him, don't let me go back humiliated to Mecca. What am I going to tell the rest of the leaders? What am I going to do? Now, the hadith describes that as he's in the house of Ali ibn Abi Talib, who's sitting down, Fatima radiallahu anha, and who else? Hassan. Hassan, how old is Al-Hassan now? 4 or 5 years old. The grandson of the Prophet ﷺ. Hassan is running around, right in the house. And Ali ibn Abi Talib, he says to him, وَيْحَكَ يَا أَبَا سُفْيَانَ. He's like, what's wrong with you, Abu Sufyan? He says, don't you know if the Prophet ﷺ gives us an order, we don't disobey it. He hasn't said anything to us, but whatever he tells us to do, we're not going to tell him, no, we're coming to intercede on behalf of Abu Sufyan. Like, have you lost your mind? It's not going to happen, right? And subhanAllah, this, the ayah in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, قُلِ اللَّهُمَّ مَالِكَ الْمُلْكِ. Can you see the ayah? تُؤْتِي الْمُلْكَ مَنْ تَشَاءُ وَتَنْزِعُ مَنْ تَشَاءُ. Keep going. تُعِزُّ مَنْ تَشَاءُ وَتُذِلُّ مَنْ تَشَاءُ. This is called dhilla in Islam. What you see Abu Sufyan going through in this situation is called dhilla in Islam, right? He looks to Fatima radiallahu anha. He looks to Fatima radiallahu anha in the house of Ali. And he says, oh Fatima, listen to what he says. Can you ask this little boy of yours, the grandson of the Prophet ﷺ, was 5 years old. Look at the level of desperation. Ask this little boy of yours to go and seek protection for us from his grandfather. Seek protection from his grandfather, from the Prophet ﷺ. By the way, can any Muslim ask for protection? Any Muslim can ask for protection. By most fuqaha, even the one that is not baligh, even the one that is not baligh. This is true in Muslim tradition. Like when you hear, like subhanAllah, Afghanistan, Pakistan, like, oh, we gave protection. This is 100% valid, 100% from the Sharia, 100%. I protect so and so. The whole ummah has to listen to what you just, what you just did. So he says, can you go and ask your grandfather for protection, and we will make him. And then he goes on and says, and we will make him Sayyid al-Arab. What does Sayyid al-Arab mean? The leader of the Arabs. We will make him Sayyid al-Arab. And she says to him, subhanAllah, the tables have turned. Like, look how the tables have turned from a few years ago. So Fatima, radiallahu anha, she says to him, we don't actually care about him being Sayyid al-Arab, because the Prophet ﷺ already said about him, he's Sayyid al-Muslimin, he is Sayyid, Sayyida Shabab, Ahl al-Jannah. Like, we don't need this. The Prophet ﷺ has already given him a title, and we're far more blessed with what the Prophet ﷺ said about him than anything that you're going to give us, right? Sayyid Shabab, Ahl al-Jannah, right? And I think we covered this before, right? When he was born. She said, my son cannot offer you security, and we cannot go against the Prophet ﷺ. And then so he turns back to Ali radiallahu. And he says, Ya Abul Hasan, what can I do? Give me some advice. He's extremely desperate. Give me some advice. What can I do? What do you counsel me to do? Right? And he says, so Ali radiallahu, he thinks for a little bit. And he says, look, you are the Sayyid of Banu Kinana. Banu Kinana are the same as the Quraysh. Like, you're the Sayyid of the Quraysh, you're the leader of the Quraysh. I just want you to picture this. He is a president from another country. You understand that? He's a president from a country that used to be a superpower. That's what this is. That's what's going on, right? And he says, you're the Sayyid of Banu Kinana. And he says, why don't you go to the masjid? Go to the masjid, Masjid Nabawi, and ask anyone that can protect you to protect you. He says, if anyone protects you, like, just go. Like, what else can I tell you? Go to the masjid and ask, right? And Abu Sufyan goes to the masjid, and he makes an announcement to the Muslims. He makes an announcement to the Muslims in Medina. Anyone, come and protect me. Anyone come and protect me, right? And this, subhanAllah, subhanahu wa ta'ala, shows you the humiliation of the pagans, right? The humiliations of the kuffar, right? And no one, not a single person, would offer the protection to Abu Sufyan, radiallahu anhu. Not a single person. And before leaving Medina, he goes to the house of his daughter, right? His daughter's name is Habiba, and her real name is Ramla bint Abi Sufyan. Remember Ramla bint Abi Sufyan? She's the one that migrated with her husband to Abyssinia. First migration, he migrated to her husband to Abyssinia. She's probably not seen her father for a good 13, 14 years. 13, 14 years they haven't seen each other. So he goes to her house. By the way, what happened to the husband of Ramla? He died in Abyssinia as a mushrik. He became a murtad. He became a murtad, then he died as a murtad. And this is when the Prophet ﷺ proposes to her in absentia. And in Najashi radiallahu anhu, he actually creates the walima for them, and he pays the mahr on behalf of the Prophet ﷺ. So this is Ramla bint Abi Sufyan. And she comes back. She comes back when? To the mainland. When does she come back? Khaybar, right after Khaybar. She comes back with Ja'far ibn Abi Talib. Right? Ja'far ibn Abi Talib brings her back at the time, right after the conquest of Khaybar. Okay. So he comes into the house of Ramla, and he's about to sit, and she packs up the mattress. She says, wait. She packs up the mattress of the Prophet and she tells him, okay, you can sit there. And he sits on. The Prophet doesn't have an elevated bed. You understand? Like it's essentially like what we call a modern day futon. Maybe not even as comfortable as the futon. You understand? Like it was ground level, and she packs up the mattress, and she says, you can sit on the wood, right? So Abu Sufyan says something really, really funny. Abu Sufyan says, he says, I don't know if you're protecting me from the mattress or whether you're protecting the mattress from me. And she says to him, no, this is the sarir of the Prophet ﷺ, wa anta mushrikun najis. She says, brother, this is the bed of the Prophet ﷺ, and you have the najasa of a mushrik. So sit on the floor. By the way, so if you invite a mushrik in your house, can they sit on your couch or not? Is that permissible? 100% permissible. Okay. So this was exceptional behavior from Habiba. So out of respect for the Prophet ﷺ. Of course, you can invite anyone to your house and they can sit anywhere they want. Okay, good. So she did it out of respect for the Prophet ﷺ. So he says to her, Ya Bunayya, he says, oh, you're my daughter. He says, I don't know what evil has touched you after you left me. I don't know what evil this is that you now have after you left, right? And he leaves the house and he returns to the Quraysh and he tells them vividly what happened. He tells the people in Dar al-Nadwa, he's like in the Congress telling them exactly step by step what happened. And the Quraysh tell him, they made a fool of you. Like you're a loser, and they made a fool of you for going over there. And one of the lessons, or one of the comments that you hear from the scholars of Sirah is they say the spectrum of responses. They comment about the spectrum of responses that Abu Sufyan got from the Sahaba radhiyallahu anhu, right? So you have on one extreme Umar ibn Abi Talib, like he kicks him out and he mocks him, makes fun of him. You have the most respectable response from who? Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radhiyallahu anhu. Ali ibn Abi Talib is kind of in the middle. Right? Ali ibn Abi Talib is kind of in the middle. And he tells them that was like, he's the only one that would even listen to me. He's like, he's the only one that would have a conversation with me. The other two shut me down. One very politely, one very impolitely, but Ali ibn Abi Talib was the only one willing to even listen and talk and you know what I mean? And so on and so forth. Which by the way teaches us a lesson that the spectrum of responses for Muslims against situations going on, is completely acceptable. By the way, up to and including in masjid affairs. I'll just say this to you. If I've seen this in other masajid, a masjid may make a decision, whatever the decision is, and you want to get community feedback, right? The spectrum of reaction from the community could be very different. Some people could be 100% with you, some people are 100% against you, and both could be very passionate about it. Some people in the middle, very normal. Very normal. But the other thing we learn is what? Even in negotiations with an enemy, it's permissible to have a spectrum of responses. This is one of the things that the fuqaha of Sirah take from this, right? In the US, there's a very famous expression. They say, good cop, bad cop. Good cop. We could totally play that. Good cop, bad cop. Oh, they're really, no. We're never going to give the, oh, yeah, that'll be fine. Don't worry. No, whatever. Yeah, it's totally okay. Totally okay, right? So this is some of what's taken from the reaction to Abu Sufyan. So the Prophet ﷺ then after that, he announces the following. He says, I am preparing, listen to this. This is different. I'm preparing for a large expedition and everyone must yield the call. Everyone, meaning every able-bodied male has to join. This is called in Islam a fard ayn. If the Amir says this is a fard ayn, it's not an option. It's not like, hey, we're going to go for a caravan, whoever's ready to, it's not like that. This is very different. So everyone now starts to prepare to join the Prophet ﷺ. Everyone must come. Tells them, he doesn't tell them anything about where they're going. Prophet ﷺ doesn't tell them where they're going. There's a very famous hadith by Abu Bakr. Does anyone know this hadith? At this particular moment, when they're in preparation, Prophet ﷺ just says, just prepare. He won't tell them where, right? Abu Bakr goes to the house of his daughter. Right? And he says to Aisha, he says, hey, the Prophet ﷺ, do you know what's going on? She's like, yeah, no, I know there's a big expedition going on. I'm packing his bags. He tells him, I'm preparing his bags for him. He says, do you know where we're going? She says, no, he hasn't told me anything. Even his daughter, wife of the Prophet ﷺ, didn't know where the Prophet ﷺ was going, where he was going. And she says, Wallahi, I don't know. Okay. Why do you think the Prophet ﷺ doesn't tell them? It's easy. Very confidential, military affairs, state affairs. Yeah. This, by the way, this particular event is probably the most secretive that the Prophet ﷺ has ever been in the whole history of the Seerah. This particular event in preparation for Fatah Makkah, the most secretive that he has personally been. Right? He informs absolutely no one, and you'll see that he'll tell them when, literally 24 hours before they're going to go, where they're going. Literally 24 hours, right? Okay. And we know that, you go tell a secret to someone, like, I'm going to tell you a secret, but don't tell anyone. We know what happens with those things, right? Okay. So Ibn Sa'd in the so does anyone know Ibn Sa'd? Like I think I mentioned him before. He has a very famous book called Al-Maghazi. Al-Maghazi. Anyone heard of that book? All it covers is the ghazawat and the battles. Like all it covers, right? He says that the Prophet ﷺ intentionally sent out a scouting expedition to the north. Mecca's to the south. He sends a scouting expedition to the north to lure people's, thoughts away from what's going on, right, in the south, because Mecca's in the south. And he says he tells them to go and find wells on the way to Syria, which to the Arabs makes complete sense, because where were they just before? Mu'ta and Dhat al-Salasil. He was heading north in both of them. So it looked like he was going to go back to the Romans. But by the way, does the Prophet ﷺ eventually go back to the Romans? Does he go back? Tabuk, which happens when? After Fath Makkah, right? So it makes complete sense that the Prophet ﷺ would send a third expedition to the north, right? So they're looking at this going, the Muslims are preparing north. I bet you that's where they're going. Look, he's even got some guys looking for water. They're trying to plot a path. They're figuring out the GPS coordinates. Look at the. So he does this intentionally, right? This is mentioned. And he sends them to a place called Batn Idam. By the way, this is very much a translation of the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, al-harbu khida. Khida or khuda. Both are correct, right? Which means war is deceit, right? So we'll wrap up because I think we've been here for a while. So the books of Sirah will tell you every single muhajir and every single Ansari joined up, packed up, and they're ready to go, including the surrounding tribes. So, for example, a tribe called Muzayna supplied 1,000 men. Banu Sulaim provided 1,700 men. That the army got to 10,000 men. 10,000 men. I just want you to think about this. 10,000 men compared to how many did we have in Badr? 313. Think about that. Think about the growth. Like, when they book a startup, it's like, oh, look, this parabolic growth. Look how fat. Like, look at that. Right? Okay, you like that, don't you? Okay. So, look at, subhanAllah, the success, right? Success of the da'wah of Islam. In Ahzab, we had 10,000 men on the other side. In Ahzab, when the Quraysh came, there was 10,000 men surrounding Medina. Now it's 10,000 Muslims leaving Medina, right? So the Prophet ﷺ left Medina when? 10th of Ramadan, the 8th year of Hijrah. So the Muslims are already in Ramadan, and he packs up the 10,000 men, and they leave Medina 10th of Ramadan, and they arrive in Mecca the 19th of Ramadan. It takes them 9 days to march 10,000 people. I just want to tell you, that's a record in terms of speed. A record in terms of speed. It usually took an average caravan, like a mom and pop minivan, 7 days between Mecca and between Medina. He marches 10,000 men, and they arrive at the outskirts of Mecca on the 19th of Ramadan. We're going to close here. I'll ask you a question at the end. I'll just leave you on this cliffhanger for the next episode. So one of the companions of the Prophet ﷺ, his name is, who memorized Surah Al-Mumtahna? What's the first ayah? Okay. His name is Hatib ibn Abi Balta'a. Hatib ibn Abi Balta'a. He decides to send a letter to the Meccans, a secret letter, to tell them the Prophet ﷺ is about to attack. Prepare yourselves. All right? Prophet ﷺ is about to attack. We'll stop here. We'll talk about that next time, inshallah. Actually, maybe I'll ask you this question and then we'll make it on, inshallah. So we talked about the marriage of, this is a trick question, just to be very clear. So this is an absolutely trick question. We talked about the marriage of Habiba to the Prophet ﷺ. So the question is, who was her wali? Because what are the conditions of marriage? So who's not married here? Not married? Just one brother not married? You guys are all married? Blue, yellow, you guys are married? No, not you, your kids. You guys not married, right? Okay, so if you're not married, raise your hand. Raise your hand. Not married people. Are you married? Okay, good. Like, why are you guys doing this? Like, it's okay. We were all not married at one point in time. Okay, so not married people, what are the conditions of marriage? Mahr, wali, okay. Wait, you're not done yet. You don't have all the conditions. So I'm trying to figure out who's qualified. So you have 2/3 right. What's the third thing? Mahr, wali, and Yeah, of course. So let's assume all of that exists, but like, what's the third one? Oh, two witnesses, the witnesses, right? So the mahar and the witnesses. Let's assume that we're all ready to get married. Okay, so you guys, rest of you guys, did you hear that? From the people of? Of course, yeah, Muslim people, of course, yeah. So did you guys get that? The rest of you? Yeah? Can you say that? Can you say what he just said? Dude, he just said it. He just gave you the answer. Mahar, wali, and two witnesses. Okay, got it? Then she has to be Muslimah. Bismillah. You guys ready to go? Tell the fathers. Okay. All right. You ready to go? MashaAllah. Okay. So when he married, so when the Prophet ﷺ married Habiba, who was her wali? That's the question. Because we know Najashi had the walima. Najashi had the walima. All right. Let's say that Najashi put up the mahar, the Prophet ﷺ paid him back. Let's just pretend that that's what happened. Okay. Who was her wali? Herself? Her son? Who's her son? Okay. Okay, mashallah. Her wali was the Prophet ﷺ. Why? MashaAllah. Okay, but more importantly in the Quran, النبي أولى بالمؤمنين من أنفسهم. Right. So in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, the Prophet ﷺ is the most important wali for all the believers. Like, how is he gonna? Because what's the job of the wali in marriage? What's the job of the wali? Make sure what? Make sure the girl is protected. Make sure she gets her rights. Make sure that the man is a good man. Like as a father, as a brother, we can check out men better than sisters can. Maybe better than the mother or the sister. Like we know how to interview men. You know what I mean? Men know how to interview men, right? And so that is the job of the wali. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, how can you have a better wali? Like the Prophet ﷺ is not going to want anything bad for her. Of course he's going to want good for her. Right, so that was the trick question. Alhamdulillah. All right. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى ال محمد كما صليت على ابراهيم وعلى ال ابراهيم اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى ال محمد كما باركت على ابراهيم وعلى ال ابراهيم في العالمين انك حميد مجيد اللهم اغفر للمسلمين والمسلمات والمؤمنين والمؤمنات الاحياء والاموات انك سميع قريب مجيب الدعوات اللهم اغفر لنا ذنوبنا واسرافنا في امرنا وثبت اقدامنا وانصرنا على القوم الكافرين اللهم ارنا الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه ارنا الباطل باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه اللهم انصر الاسلام واعز المسلمين اللهم انصر الاسلام وعز المسلمين واعلو برحمتك كلمة الحق والدين اللهم انصر اهلنا في فلسطين اللهم انصرهم نصرا مؤزرا يا رب العالمين واخر دعوانا ان الحمد لله رب العالمين جزاكم الله خير. I will see you inshallah next week.